following presentation is for hot nerds only.
What's up, hot nerds? Today, I want to show you this absolutely insane Dungeons & Dragons cache that we found in my grandmother's basement. I'm also going to do a little bit of restoration on some of it because it's old. And I also am going to repaint this lead Ral Partha miniature from 1979. But first we gotta get some backstory. And for that, we need to go way back to when my dad was a wee lad. Actually, I don't really have any footage of that, so it would be kind of boring. Just know that my dad and his friends were really into Dungeons & Dragons as kids. Nerd. So anyway, my dad's parents, my grandparents, are moving, and so he's been going down there to help them clean out some of their stuff. And lo and behold, he found some Dungeons & Dragons literature. And so last week I went on vacation with my family. And on my way home, I took a detour up there to see what kind of stuff there was. And when I saw what he had found in the basement, I was f***ing shook. When I first got to see what was in this cache, I got so excited. It was like overwhelming. And I sort of imagine it's what people feel like when they find old cars in barns or whatever. Because it's just so much cool, old, rare stuff. And so the first thing that jumped out to me was the first edition monster manual and the Deities and Demigods book from Advanced Dungeons & Dragons. These books are a classic, so to have physical copies of them is unbelievable. In this stash, there was also a stack of original character sheets from Advanced Dungeons & Dragons, and it's like old and sort of like brittle on the original paper. Awesome.
Never, ever use the word awesome.
There's also 2 books of hexagon graph paper for hex crawls and stuff, and it's all stained and old and just... But that, of course, is just the tip of the iceberg. This is where the real good stuff is right here. Now, these box sets I honestly didn't even know existed before I came across them. So when Gary Gygax and company introduced Advanced Dungeons & Dragons, they wanted to still have regular Dungeons & Dragons. And so they re-released that rule set in these box sets. And so the first one is the basic set. And inside it comes the basic rules. And then also Dungeon Module B2, Keep of the Borderlands. But a cool thing about this particular find is that it also came with B1 and B3, which is really cool because these modules are some of the cooler things to have physical copies of, because you can buy them digitally now and it's just not as cool. To have the physical copies is really amazing. Another interesting thing that just happened to be in this box is M1. It's a solo adventure, and so the way it was supposed to be played is that you're the player and the dungeon master. You just read it like a choose your own adventure book, and when you come across something where there's a choice, you use a invisible ink marker and make the selections appear. Unfortunately, there was no marker in the box, and it's already been played through about halfway, but it's kind of neat. So the only thing missing from this box are the die and the crayon, which doesn't really matter to me because you can buy die and crayons in 2021, no problem. It's the books that are of value to me. So this is box 1, the basic set. And then what this is box 2, and it's called the expert set. So what is in this box is the expert rules, which you use to sort of expand on the basic rules. And then it also comes with another module, Dungeon Module X1, which is the Isle of Dread. But another thing that was in this box that made me absolutely giddy when I saw it, because I'm a huge Matthew Colville watcher, is the village of Hamlet.
A lot of people think Hamlet is the ideal starting town. It's from an adventure that came out in 1979 called The Village of Hamlet.
And now I have the hard copy of it in all its glory. Now, I'm not exactly sure what the monetary value of these things are. I've heard reports that some of it could be worth, a pretty penny, but it's more valuable to me as like a collector's item to put on a shelf and be like, oh, I have these things, the physical copies. So as a result of that, I'm not really concerned that most of these books have the owner's name and address written in Sharpie in all of them. That doesn't matter to me. That actually adds to the overall, character of the books, of the history of these specific books. So I think that's cool. The one thing I am going to do though, is you see how this box is falling apart. I think we're going to restore these boxes just so that they sit together and look a little bit more presentable. So let's go do that right now.
First thing that I tried to do was iron the box because it was a little bowed, and honestly, I don't think this did anything. The next step was to use this gum tape to tape down the corners. I used a wet paper towel to get it wet because I didn't want to use my gross ass tongue. And what's nice about this tape is that it's a little bit flexible, so it's got a little bit of forgiveness when you put the box on. After I put on the first layer, I realized that these little corners were also glued down at one point, so I had to put down another layer of gum tape to attach those corners. This was no problem at all, just a little wet and a little stick, you know, the usual. Then this box had a hole in the front, and so I thought it would be best to patch that baby up using a little gum tape, made a little square, wetted it, and stuck it down. And the next step was to use a pair of scissors to wedge open the glue because it was glued shut thanks to the oat tree ordeal in the last video. And our mission objective here is to use the glue to seal up any of these corners that may not be stuck down, and generally just reassemble the outside of the box. Might have to invest in some machinist blocks because they would be much better at holding things still than a bottle of wine and a jar of coins. And then when I said that ironing didn't work, I tried to do it again with some weight, and this didn't really seem to work either, but who cares?
And just like that, we're done. I'm in a different shirt, time has passed. The boxes have been refurbished. You know, they're still a little worn, but that's the charm, right? They're not brand new, they're used, they've been loved, but now I don't have to worry about them falling apart on my shelf. And with that, it's time to paint the cleric.
So the previous owner of this cleric painted it, and to be totally honest, I don't love it. Fortunately, Ral Partha minis made in the 70s and 80s were printed in lead, so it's very easy to take the paint off, allegedly. I got this tip from the internet to use lacquer thinner to remove the paint from metal miniatures, but I was a little worried because I didn't know if it was going to eat through this red plastic tub, so I had to be extra cautious at the beginning to make sure it wasn't just going to immediately burn right through, and it didn't, so I threw the mini in there, let it soak for a little bit, and then it was time to sort of scrub. I used a normal paintbrush here, but I ended up going to buy an old toothbrush to use. I also learned that lacquer thinner goes through nitrile gloves, so that was pretty cool. So it turns out that it wasn't as easy to get all the paint off, but it was good enough for me. I gave it a white primer, you know, just to cover it all up, since acrylic doesn't like to stick to metal minis. And a little unorthodox, I started with the black basing because I needed to have black underneath the robes, so when I put the brown over top, you didn't see white underneath. The brown is more of an olive color, which I thought was fitting since he's a snake cleric. I painted the belt brown, and then I went on to paint the gray center thing, whatever that is, the brown staff, and then the skin tone, which I thought was, you know, old and creepy. Then I gave it a black wash all over. One thing I sort of have to figure out is how to make miniatures look better on camera, because it looks way better in real life than it does here. But here's the final paint job. It looks pretty good. I'm pleased with it. I think it's an improvement over the last one. One thing that I noticed that was kind of funny is that the new miniatures are actually much bigger than the old lead miniatures.
And there you have it, an incredible and insane Dungeons & Dragons haul from my grandparents' basement. I heard rumors that there's another stash somewhere that has a player's handbook and some of the other books in stacks of modules. I have my dad on the hunt. Hopefully he finds them. But for now, that's all I got for you. Thanks for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe if this is something that you've enjoyed. My next video will be hopefully painting and assembling the giant pirate ship that has yet to ship. But be sure to ring that bell. I don't really know what ringing the bell does. Be sure to subscribe to see more nerd shit.